He called her plain, boring, dead weight for 18 months. Billionaire Derek Ashford treated his wife Claire like an embarrassment he had to hide. But when she discovered his affair in the prenup designed to trap her, everything changed. What happened next at the Metropolis Gala would be watched by millions. Claire didn't just show up. She exposed everything. The affair, the fraud, the pattern of abuse, and she did it live, on camera, in front of everyone who had ever dismissed her. This is the story of a woman who refused to stay silent and the billionaire who never saw her coming. If this story moves you, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe so you never miss these powerful narratives. Let's dive in. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the espresso machine. Claire Hartwell stood in the kitchen of her own home, feeling like an intruder. She had been awake since 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom in the East Wing. Her husband Derek slept in the master suite on the opposite side of the apartment. They had not shared a bed in 8 months. The marriage had been dying slowly for 18 months now, ever since Derek's tech company went public and turned him from a charming startup founder into a billionaire with an ego to match his bank account. Claire had fallen in love with the man who coded at fight all night and dreamed about changing the world. She had married someone completely different. She heard his footsteps before she saw him. Derek Ashford walked into the kitchen wearing a $1,000 suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression already annoyed. "You're up early," he said, not looking at her as he grabbed the espresso she had just made for herself. "Couldn't sleep," Claire replied quietly. "Well, try to keep it down. I have a 7 a.m. call with investors." He took a sip and grimaced. "This is cold." It was not cold. She had just made it. "I'll make another," Claire said, reaching for a clean cup. "Don't bother. I'll grab something at the office." Derek set the cup down with a dismissive clink. "By the way, my publicist Rachel will be stopping by today to prep me for the gala. Stay out of the way." "Okay." The Metropolis Gala, the biggest charity event of the year, where New York's elite gathered to see and be seen. Derek's company was the lead sponsor this year. He had made it very clear that Claire's attendance was mandatory for appearances, but her presence was unwanted. "Of course," she said. He was already walking away when he paused and turned back. "And Claire tried to do something about your appearance before the gala. You look tired. It reflects poorly on me." The door closed behind him before she could respond. Claire stood alone in the enormous kitchen, surrounded by marble countertops and top-of-the-line appliances she had never wanted. She caught her reflection in the polished chrome of the refrigerator. A pale, thin woman with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail stared back at her. She looked tired because she was tired. Tired of walking on eggshells. Tired of making herself small. Tired of being treated like a liability instead of a wife. Claire had been a financial analyst before she married Derek. A good one. She had worked under Grace Montgomery, a legend on Wall Street, and had been on track for a promising career. But Derek had convinced her to quit when they got engaged. "You won't need to work," he had said, his arms around her, his voice so sure. "I want you to be happy, stress-free. Let me take care of everything." What he had really meant was, "I want you dependent on me. I want you controllable." Claire walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, people were living authentic lives. They were making real choices. They were free. She was trapped in a gilded cage with a man who despised her. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Tori Romano, the only person from her old life Derek had not managed to completely isolate her from. "Coffee this week, miss you?" Claire wanted to say yes, but Derek monitored her credit cards, questioned every expense, every outing. It was easier to stay home. She was typing a polite excuse when her phone buzzed again. This time, it was not Tori. It was a notification from Derek's tablet, which was charging on the kitchen counter. He had left it behind in his rush. Claire glanced at the screen, an iMessage notification from Rachel Winters. "Can't wait to see you later. Make sure your wife isn't around. I want you all to myself." Claire's heart stopped. She picked up the tablet with shaking hands. She knew his passcode. He had never bothered to hide it because he had never considered her a threat. The messages loaded, 6 months of conversations. Flirting that escalated into explicit exchanges. Plans to meet at hotels. Rachel calling Derek baby, and him responding with, I'm counting down the days until I'm free of her. Claire scrolled further, her breathing shallow. Once we hit the 2-year mark, I'll divorce her. Derek had written 3 weeks ago. The prenup expires and I can pay her off cheaply. Then we can finally be together. Rachel's response. She's so desperate to please. Like a dog begging for scraps. How did you stand it this long? Derek, the marriage was good for optics during the IPO. She made me look stable. But now she's just dead weight. Plain, boring, and completely useless. The tablet slipped from Claire's hands and clattered onto the counter. She had known the marriage was broken. She had known Derek no longer loved her. But this was different. This was calculated. Cruel. He had been planning her disposal like a business transaction. And the prenup. God. The prenup. Claire's father had died 2 years ago from cancer, leaving behind $400,000 in medical debt. She had depleted her savings trying to help him. When she married Derek, his lawyers had presented her with a prenuptial agreement. If she left the marriage before 2 years, she would get nothing. After 2 years, she would receive a modest settlement. She had signed it in a haze of grief, desperate for stability after losing her father. Now she understood. Derek had structured the prenup to trap her for exactly as long as he needed her. 2 years to solidify his image as a stable, married CEO. Then he could discard her and move on to Rachel. She had 6 months left until the 2-year mark. 6 more months of this hell. Claire heard the door open. Derek had come back. "Forgot my tablet," he called out. She did not think. She just reacted. "I saw the messages," Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt. Derek walked into the kitchen and stopped. His expression did not even change. "So you went through my private communications," he said coldly. "That's an invasion of privacy." "Claire, you're having an affair. I'm a grown man. I can do what I want." The casualness of it stunned her. No denial, no apology, just cold indifference. "I'm your wife. You're a name on a piece of paper," Derek said, picking up his tablet. "Don't pretend this marriage was ever real. It was always a transaction. You got financial security. I got the appearance of stability. Now that transaction is almost over. You planned this from the beginning. I planned a mutually beneficial arrangement. You agreed to it." "I loved you," Claire whispered. Derek laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "You love the idea of being married to a successful man. You love the penthouse and the credit cards and the status. Don't act like you're some romantic victim." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost pitying. "Look at yourself, Claire. You were different when we met. You had ambition, drive. Now you're just here. You do nothing. You are nothing. I'm not even sure what you do all day besides exist." Each word landed like a physical blow. "If you leave now, you get nothing." Derek continued. "Your dad's medical debt, still yours. That prenup is ironclad. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep your mouth shut for 6 more months. You're going to play the dutiful wife at the gala and any other events I need you at. And when the 2 years are up, I'll write you a check and you can disappear. Or you can make a scene, leave now, and spend the rest of your life drowning in debt with no job prospects and no references. Your choice." He walked out without waiting for an answer. Claire stood frozen in the kitchen, her entire world crumbling around her. She had 2 choices: endure 6 more months of abuse, or leave with nothing and destroy what little remained of her life. But as she stood there, shaking with rage and grief, a third option began to form in her mind. She could fight back. Claire waited until Derek left for his office before she moved. She grabbed her phone, her emergency credit card hidden in an old jewelry box, and walked out of the penthouse for the first time in 3 weeks. The subway felt like freedom. Tori Romano's law office was in Midtown, tucked into a building that had seen better days. Tori had started her own practice 5 years ago, specializing in family law. She had been Claire's best friend since college, and the one person Derek had never successfully banned from her life. Tori took one look at Claire's face and pulled her into the office, locking the door behind them. "What happened?" Tori asked, guiding Claire to a chair. Claire told her everything. The messages, the affair, the prenup trap, Derek's cold dismissal of their entire marriage. Tori listened, her expression growing darker with every detail. That bastard, she said when Claire finished. That calculating, manipulative bastard. Can I break the prenup? Claire asked. Is there any way out? Tori pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Prenuptial agreements can be voided under certain circumstances. Fraud, duress, unconscionability. But it's not easy. We'd need to prove he entered the marriage in bad faith or that the agreement itself is fundamentally unfair. What about the affair? New York is a no-fault divorce state now, so adultery alone won't void the prenup. But if we can prove a pattern of abuse and show that he was hiding assets or planning to defraud you of your rightful share, we might have a case. Tori looked up. We'd need documentation. Evidence. Lots of it. I have the messages on his tablet. That's a start, but we need more. Financial records showing he's been spending marital assets on Rachel. Proof that he's been sabotaging your career or isolating you. Witnesses who can testify to his behavior. Claire thought about the past 18 months. Derek monitoring her credit cards, calling her former employer and telling them she was mentally unstable when they reached out about a position, convincing their mutual friends that she was antisocial and difficult. He's been destroying me systematically, Claire said, for months. Then we document it. Every instance, every witness. We build a case so solid that no judge can ignore it. For the first time in hours, Claire felt a flicker of hope. There's something else, Tori said, her expression thoughtful. Do you remember Grace Montgomery, your old boss? Of course, she's legendary. She retired from Wall Street about 5 years ago after exposing a massive sexual harassment case at her firm. Now she runs a women's advocacy fund. She helps women escape abusive situations, especially when powerful men use money and legal systems to trap them. Claire's heart began to race. You think she'd help me? I think she'd be furious if she knew what Derek was doing to you. Let me make a call. Tori picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and dialed. The conversation was brief but promising. She'll meet with you tomorrow, Tori said, hanging up. 2 p.m., her office downtown. Claire, Grace Montgomery doesn't take on many cases anymore. But when she does, she goes to war. If anyone can help you take down Derek Ashford, it's her. Claire left Tori's office feeling something she had not felt in over a year agency. She was not going to be a victim anymore. She was going to fight back. But first, she needed evidence. That night, Claire waited until Derek was asleep. She crept into his home office, a room she was usually forbidden from entering. Her hands shook as she turned on his desktop computer. The password was the same as everything else. He had never considered her smart enough to be a threat. She inserted a USB drive and began copying files, financial statements, emails, business documents that showed company money being funneled into personal accounts, credit card statements with charges to expensive hotels on dates she knew he had claimed to be in business meetings. It took 2 hours to copy everything. When she was done, Claire stood in the doorway of Derek's office and looked around at the evidence of his success, the awards. The photos of him with celebrities and politicians, the expensive art on the walls, all of it built on lies and cruelty. She was going to burn it all down. The next afternoon, Claire sat in Grace Montgomery's office, a bright, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Grace herself was in her 50s, elegant and sharp-eyed, with silver hair cut in a precise bob. Tori told me about your situation, Grace said without preamble. I've been following Derek Ashford for a while now. His company, his business practices. He's a predator hiding behind a charming smile and good press. You've investigated him. I investigate a lot of powerful men, Grace said. It's amazing what you find when you look close enough. Derek Ashford has a pattern. You're not his first wife. Did you know that? Claire's blood ran cold. What? He was married once before, very briefly, before his company took off. The marriage lasted 11 months. She signed a similar prenup and left with almost nothing. There's also an ex-girlfriend from college who filed a restraining order against him. It was settled quietly. Why didn't I know this? Because men like Derek are very good at burying their pasts. They pay lawyers to make problems disappear. They use NDAs to silence women. They control narratives. Grace leaned forward. Here's what I know about men like your husband. Claire, they don't stop. They find new victims. They refine their methods. Derek is already planning his next move. After you, it'll be Rachel. And after Rachel, someone else. So what do I do? We don't just get you out. We make sure he can't do this to anyone else. We expose the pattern. We show the world who Derek Ashford really is. How? Grace smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had taken down bigger monsters than Derek Ashford. We need a moment, Grace said. A public moment where he can't control the narrative. Where the truth comes out and he can't bury it. I'm thinking the Metropolis Gala. The gala is in 10 days. Then we have 10 days to build an airtight case. Can you get me access to those files you copied? Claire handed over the USB drive. Grace plugged it into her laptop and began scrolling through the documents, her expression growing more satisfied with each page. This is good, Grace said. This shows financial impropriety, but we need more. We need testimony from other victims. We need proof of the affair that's so clear he can't deny it. How do I get that? Leave that to me. I have resources, investigators who specialize in this kind of work. What I need from you is to stay strong. Derek is going to fight dirty. Are you ready for that? Claire thought about the past 18 months, the isolation, the verbal abuse, the systematic destruction of her confidence and independence. I'm ready, she said. Good, because we're about to go to war. Over the next week, Grace's team worked quickly. A private investigator tailed Derek and Rachel, capturing photos of them entering and leaving hotels together. A forensic accountant combed through the files Claire had provided, finding evidence that Derek had been using company funds for personal expenses, a potential securities violation. Most importantly, Grace tracked down Derek's first wife, a woman named Jennifer Porter, who had disappeared from public life after her divorce. Jennifer agreed to speak with them, and what she revealed was damning. He isolated me from my friends, Jennifer said, sitting in Grace's office, her hands shaking slightly as she held a cup of tea. He controlled my money, monitored my phone, made me feel crazy for questioning him. When I finally tried to leave, he threatened to destroy me. He had lawyers, money, power. I had nothing. So I signed his settlement, took the payout, and disappeared. Would you be willing to testify to that? Grace asked gently. Jennifer hesitated. If I break the NDA, I have to return the settlement money. It's all I have. We'll cover it, Grace said immediately. My fund will pay whatever you owe. You don't have to be silent anymore. Jennifer started to cry. I thought I was the only one. I thought it was my fault. Claire reached across and took her hand. It wasn't your fault, and you're not alone anymore. By the end of the week, they had everything they needed. Photos, financial records, witness testimony, a pattern of abuse that was undeniable. Tori prepared the legal documents to void the prenup and file for divorce. Grace contacted a journalist named Nathan Cross, an investigative reporter known for exposing corporate corruption. Nathan agreed to write a story. It would publish the day of the gala. Everything was in place. And then, 48 hours before the gala, it all fell apart. Claire was at Tori's apartment, going over the final details of their plan. When Tori's phone rang, she answered, listened for a moment, and her face went pale. I'll call you back, Tori said. Hanging up, she turned to Claire. We have a problem. A big one. What happened? Derek filed for divorce this morning. He beat us to it. Claire's stomach dropped. But we were going to file tomorrow. He moved faster. And Claire, there's more. He's claiming you were unfaithful. He has a witness who says they saw you with another man at a hotel 3 weeks ago. That's insane. I haven't been anywhere near a hotel, but I barely leave the apartment. Tori's expression was grim. He's manufacturing evidence. The witness is probably someone he paid off. And because he filed first, he gets to control the initial narrative. The prenup now works against us. You have to prove you weren't unfaithful, or you get nothing. Aussie, can't we use our evidence? The affair with Rachel, the financial records? We can try, but Derek's lawyers are already arguing that any evidence you gathered was obtained illegally. They're claiming you hacked into his private accounts. They might be able to get it all thrown out. Claire felt the walls closing in. Derek had outmaneuvered them. Grace arrived an hour later, her expression thunderous. I underestimated him. He must have suspected something. Maybe he noticed the files were accessed. Maybe Rachel tipped him off. Either way, he's moved into damage control mode. What about Nathan's article? Claire asked desperately. Grace's phone rang. She listened, her face darkening, then hung up. Nathan's editor just killed the story. They got a call from Derek's lawyers threatening a massive defamation suit. The paper doesn't want the liability. Can't Nathan publish it somewhere else? He's trying, but every outlet he's contacted is spooked. Derek has connections. Deep ones. Tori stood up and started pacing. This is bad. Really bad. Without the article to create public pressure, and with Derek controlling the legal narrative, Claire could lose everything. The judge will see her as the unfaithful spouse trying to use fraudulent evidence. What about Jennifer? Claire asked. She agreed to testify. Grace's phone buzzed with a text. She read it and closed her eyes. Jennifer just withdrew. She received a visit from Derek's lawyers this morning. They threatened her with bankruptcy and criminal charges for violating the NDA. She's terrified. The room fell silent. All their carefully laid plans had crumbled in less than 24 hours. Derek knew, Claire said quietly. He knew we were planning something. That's why he moved so fast. The question is how much he knows, Tori said. Does he know about the Gala plan? As if in answer, Claire's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Nice try, Claire. Did you really think you could outsmart me? Drop this crusade now, or I will destroy you. You have 24 hours to accept my settlement, offer $50,000 and an NDA. Otherwise, I will drag you through court for years and make sure you never work again. Your choice. Claire showed them the message. He's giving you an out, Grace said, which means he's worried. If he was completely confident, he wouldn't bother negotiating. Or he's just twisting the knife, Tori said, showing her he's in control. Claire looked between her two allies. These women had risked their time, resources, and reputations to help her, and now they were all going to lose. I'm sorry, Claire whispered. I should never have dragged you into this. Stop, Grace said firmly. We're not done yet. We still have one advantage. What advantage? He's blocked every move we made. He doesn't know about the live stream. Claire blinked. What live stream? Grace pulled out her phone and called Nathan. Can you still live stream from the Gala tomorrow night? I can stream from anywhere. Nathan's voice came through the speaker. Why? Because they can kill a story, but they can't kill live video. Not once it's out there, not once people are watching. Tori caught on immediately. You want Claire to confront him publicly? On camera? In front of everyone? I want Claire to tell her story. No editors, no lawyers who can threaten outlets. Just her truth, spoken directly to the world. They'll sue her for defamation, Tori said. They'll sue all of us. Let them. Discovery in a defamation suit works both ways. They'll have to prove she's lying. We'll subpoena every record, every communication. Even if they get the evidence we have now thrown out. New evidence gathered through court process is admissible. Claire felt dizzy. You want me to walk into that gala, in front of all those people, and accuse my husband of everything on live video? Yes. I'll be destroyed, even if we win eventually. My reputation will be ruined. I'll never work in finance again. Probably not, Grace agreed. But you'll be free, and you'll stop him from doing this to someone else. It was not a small ask. Grace was asking her to sacrifice everything for a chance at justice. Claire thought about Jennifer Porter, scared and alone, forced into silence. She thought about Rachel, who had no idea she was just Derek's next target. She thought about every woman who would come after, trapped by the same system that protected men like her husband. If I do this, Claire said slowly, I need to know I'm not alone. I need to know you'll all be there. I'll be live streaming, Nathan said through the phone, and I'll have backup streams running. They won't be able to shut us all down fast enough. I'll make sure every journalist I know is watching, Grace said. Once you start talking, I'll blast it across every channel I have. It'll be viral before Derek's lawyers can even react. And I'll be there in person, Tori said. Legal backup. If they try to remove you or silence you, I'll cite your First Amendment rights loud enough for everyone to hear. Claire looked at these three people who barely knew her, who had no obligation to help her, who were willing to risk their careers and reputations for justice. Okay, she said. Let's do it. There's one more thing, Grace said. You need to look the part, not for vanity, for credibility. Derek has spent 18 months making you invisible. Tomorrow night, you need to be impossible to ignore. I don't have anything to wear. Derek controls my credit cards. Grace smiled. Leave that to me. The next afternoon, Grace arrived at Tori's apartment with a garment bag. Nothing flashy, Grace said, unzipping the bag. Nothing that looks like you're trying too hard. I want you to look like the successful financial analyst you were before Derek erased that woman. She pulled out a tailored navy blue dress, elegant and professional, simple diamond studs, low heels, a leather portfolio that looked business appropriate. You're not going as his wife, Grace said. You're going as Claire Hartwell, financial analyst and survivor. That woman is who we need tomorrow night. Claire tried on the outfit. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone she barely recognized. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like herself again. That evening, the four of them gathered in Tori's living room, going over the plan one final time. Nathan would arrive at the gala early and set up multiple live stream angles. Grace would be monitoring social media, ready to amplify the moment Claire started speaking. Tori would be positioned near the entrance, ready to block any security who tried to remove Claire. Derek's going to lose his mind, Nathan warned. Be ready for him to get aggressive. Let him, Grace said coldly. Aggressive on camera is even better. It'll show everyone who he really is. Claire's hands were shaking. Tomorrow night, she would either free herself or destroy herself completely. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Grace said. Fear means you understand the stakes. But Claire was so. Remember this. You've already lost everything. Your marriage, your career, your independence. What Derek is offering you is survival. What we're offering you is your life back. There's a difference. That night, Claire barely slept. She went over her words again and again, practicing what she would say, how she would say it. She thought about the woman she had been before Derek. Confident, ambitious, unafraid. Tomorrow night, the world would meet her again. The Metropolis Gala was held at the Museum of Modern Art, its glass and marble halls transformed into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. 500 of New York's elite gathered in designer gowns and tuxedos, champagne flutes in hand, pretending their charity mattered more than their social status. Claire arrived alone. Derek had not expected her to come. He had sent a curt text that morning, do not show up tonight. I'm serious, Claire. Stay away. She had not responded. Nathan was already inside, his phone positioned discreetly on a sculpture pedestal, aimed at the main ballroom entrance. He caught Claire's eye and nodded. The stream was live. Tori stood near the coat check, dressed in a sharp black suit that said lawyer even without words. She gave Claire an encouraging smile. Grace was not in the building. She was at her office, coordinating with every media contact she had, ready to push the live stream the moment Claire started speaking. Claire walked through the entrance, her heels clicking on marble, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She saw Derek immediately. He was at the center of a crowd of admirers, his arm around Rachel Winters. Rachel wore a red dress that probably cost more than Claire's emergency credit card limit. They looked perfect together. Beautiful, powerful, untouchable. Derek saw her, and his expression went from surprise to fury in an instant. He excused himself from his group and strode toward her, his smile fixed in place for the watching crowd but his eyes blazing with anger. What are you doing here? He hissed, grabbing her arm. I told you to stay away. This is a public event, Claire said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. I have every right to be here. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm exercising my rights. Derek's grip on her arm tightened. I'm calling security. You're leaving. Now. 2 security guards were already moving toward them, but before they could reach Claire, she pulled her arm free and stepped into the center of the ballroom. Nathan adjusted his phone angle. The live stream viewer count was climbing. 200 people, 500, 1,000. Claire turned to face the crowd. Every eye in the room was on her. "My name is Claire Hartwell," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I'm Derek Ashford's wife, and I'm here to tell you who he really is." The room went silent. Derek lunged toward her, but Tori stepped between them. "She has the right to speak," Tori said loudly. "First Amendment? You want to silence her. You'll have to go through me." "She's delusional," Derek said to the crowd, forcing a laugh. "My wife has been struggling with some mental health issues. This is very sad, but I can assure everyone that—" "I have the text messages," Claire interrupted, pulling out her phone. 6 months of communications between Derek and his publicist Rachel Winters, planning their affair, mocking me, planning the exact day he would divorce me. She held up her phone. Nathan zoomed in his live stream, capturing the message thread on screen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That was obtained illegally," Derek snarled. "You hacked my private accounts. I used your password that you never bothered to change because you never saw me as a threat." Claire said, "But you should have, because I also have financial records showing you've been using company funds to pay for hotel rooms and jewelry for Rachel. That's embezzlement. Derek, that's fraud." The crowd murmured. Phones were coming out. People were filming. Rachel tried to slip away, but someone blocked her path. She stood frozen, her face pale. "She's lying," Derek said, his voice rising. "This is defamation. I'll sue you for everything, Claire." "Please do," Claire said. "I'd love to see discovery. I'd love for a court to go through every text, every email, every credit card statement, because here's what else I found." She pulled out a folder from her portfolio. "Derek Ashford was married before me. Did any of you know that her name was Jennifer Porter? Their marriage lasted 11 months. She signed a prenup identical to mine. And when she tried to leave, he threatened to destroy her. He paid her to stay silent." "This is insane," Derek said, looking around at the crowd. "You're listening to a bitter, disturbed woman who can't handle her marriage failing." "Jennifer was willing to testify," Claire continued, "until your lawyers threatened her yesterday. You've done this before, Derek, and you'll do it again, unless someone stops you." James Sullivan, Derek's business partner, pushed through the crowd. "Derek, what is she talking about? We've been going over the books for the IPM when, if there are discrepancies—" "There are no discrepancies," Derek snapped. "She's making this up." "Then let's check," James said quietly. "Right now, let's pull up the accounts and prove she's wrong." Derek's face went white. The live stream viewer count was at 50,000 and climbing rapidly. Grace's voice came through Claire's earpiece, a tiny Bluetooth device no one could see. "Keep going. You've got him. Every major news outlet is picking up the stream. I gave up my career for you, burst. Claire said, and her voice breaking. "I isolated myself from my friends because you convinced me they didn't care. I made myself small and quiet and invisible because you told me that was what you needed. And all along, you were planning to throw me away the second I stopped being useful. You were compensated for your time," Derek said coldly, dropping the pretense. "That's what the prenup was for. You knew the deal. The deal was marriage, partnership, love." "Love," Derek laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're really going to stand here and talk about love? You married me for money and status. Don't pretend otherwise. I married you because I loved who I thought you were. You married me because I made you look good for your IPD." The crowd was pressing closer now, fascinated and horrified by the public disintegration of Derek Ashford's perfect image. Blake Ashford, Derek's father, pushed through the crowd. Blake was in his 60s, silver-haired, with the same cold eyes as his son. "That's enough," Blake said, his voice carrying authority. "This is neither the time nor the place for marital disputes. Young lady, I suggest you leave before you make this worse for yourself." "Sir, with all respect, your son is a predator who uses wealth and legal systems to abuse women," Claire said. Blake's expression hardened. "That's an actionable statement. My lawyers will be in touch." "Your lawyers already threatened Jennifer Porter into silence yesterday," Claire said. "Were you involved in that, Mr. Ashford? Did you help your son cover up his pattern of abuse? Blake's face flushed red. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose, Claire said. Your son already took everything. My career, my savings, my sense of self. The only thing I have left is my voice, and I will not be silenced. Security finally reached her. Two large men in suits. Ma'am, you need to leave the premises. On what grounds? Tori demanded, stepping forward with her phone out. Recording? She's a guest at a public charity event. She has broken no laws. She's causing a disturbance. She's exercising free speech. You remove her by force. This becomes assault on camera, in front of 50,000 live stream viewers and counting. The security guards hesitated, looking at Blake for guidance. Blake made a sharp gesture. Cut the power. Kill the lights. End this circus now. But it was too late. Nathan's live stream was running on cellular data, not building Wi-Fi. The lights went out in the museum, plunging the ballroom into darkness except for the glow of hundreds of phone screens. And in that darkness, James Sullivan's voice rang out. I believe her. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the ballroom in harsh fluorescent white. James Sullivan stood in the center of the crowd, his expression grim. I've been Derek's business partner for 5 years. James said, I've been going over the company books for weeks, preparing for our audit. I found discrepancies, expenses that didn't make sense, money moving through accounts it shouldn't be in. Derek's face was a mask of fury. James, shut up. I asked Derek about it last week. He said it was accounting errors. But it wasn't. Was it? James pulled out his own phone. I have the records here. Company credit card statements showing charges to luxury hotels, jewelry stores, restaurants, all on days Derek claimed to be in investor meetings or business conferences. He looked at Rachel. Those charges match your social media posts. That necklace you are wearing tonight, purchased with company funds 3 weeks ago, $14,000. Rachel's hand flew to her throat. This is a private business matter, Blake said sharply. Not appropriate for public discussion. It's securities fraud if it happened for our IPO, James said. Which it did. I pulled records going back 18 months. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in personal expenses disguised as business costs. If our investors had known, they never would have signed on. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Nathan's live stream viewer count was approaching 200,000. Derek turned on James. You're fired, effective immediately. You can't fire me. I own 30% of the company. I can and I will. I'll buy you out. With what money? James demanded. The company accounts you've been raiding. You've created a financial liability that could sink us. I want a full audit, public and transparent. You're believing her. Derek gestured at Claire. She's unhinged. I'm believing the numbers, James said. And she's the one who made me look closer at them. So yeah, I'm believing her. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. A man she had spoken to maybe 3 times in her marriage was standing up for her when Derek's own father would not. Tori moved to stand beside James, creating a united front. Anyone who wants to provide testimony about Derek Ashford's business practices or personal conduct can contact my office. I'm representing Claire in her divorce, and we're building a pattern of fraud and abuse case. This is defamation, Blake shouted. I will sue every person in this room who repeats these lies. They're not lying, a voice said from the crowd. A woman stepped forward. She was in her mid-30s, dressed in an elegant gray gown, her dark hair pulled back. Claire didn't recognize her. My name is Jennifer Porter, the woman said. I was married to Derek Ashford for 11 months. 8 years ago. Everything Claire said about me is true. He isolated me, controlled me, and when I tried to leave, he threatened me into silence. Derek's face went from red to white. You violated the ND. Sue me, Jennifer said. I'm done being afraid of you. Another woman pushed through the crowd, then another, then 2 more. Boom. 5 women total, all coming forward. He harassed me when I worked at his company, one said. He promised me a job and then propositioned me instead. Another added, he dated my friend in college. When she tried to break up with him, he stalked her for months. The testimonies piled up, each one adding another crack to Derek's carefully constructed image. Nathan's live stream chat was exploding. Screen captures were being shared across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. News outlets were embedding the stream. Cable news was picking it up live. Blake Ashford grabbed his son's arm. "We're leaving now. Don't say another word." But Derek was beyond reason. He turned on Claire with such hatred in his eyes that she took an involuntary step back. "You're nothing," he snarled. "You were nothing when I met you, and you're nothing now. You think you've won, I will destroy you. I have lawyers, money, connections. You'll spend the rest of your life in court. You'll never work again. No one will hire you after this. You're unemployable." "Maybe," Claire said quietly, "but I'm free." Derek lunged at her. He actually lunged, his hands reaching for her throat, his face twisted with rage. Tori and James both moved to block him. Security finally intervened, not to remove Claire but to restrain Derek. "Get off me," Derek shouted, struggling. "Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," one of the security guards said. "We've all been watching the live stream. We know exactly who you are." The guard's badge camera was on. Every moment was being documented. Blake Ashford made one last attempt at damage control. "This is a private family matter that has been exploited by a vindictive ex-wife and a mob mentality. My son and I will be releasing a full statement through our legal team. Anyone spreading defamatory content will be held accountable." "Looking forward to it," Nathan called out. Nathan Cross, investigative journalist. "I've been documenting Derek Ashford's business practices for 2 years. My full report publishes tomorrow morning." Blake's eyes narrowed. "I killed your story. You killed the paper's story, but I'm independent now. And unlike traditional media, I don't have corporate boards who can be pressured. The internet is forever." "Mr. Ashford." The live stream viewer count hit 500,000. Derek was escorted out of the ballroom by security, still shouting threats. Blake followed, his phone already to his ear, calling lawyers. Rachel Winters stood alone in the center of the ballroom, her expensive dress suddenly looking like armor that had failed to protect her. She looked at Claire with something that might have been understanding, or might have been fear that she was next. "He told me you were crazy," Rachel said quietly. "He said you were unstable, and he was trying to protect you. He'll say the same thing about you eventually," Claire replied. Rachel turned and walked away. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with shock and gossip. Tomorrow morning, Derek Ashford's name would be attached to fraud, abuse, and public meltdown. James approached Claire. "I'm sorry, I should have seen this sooner. You couldn't have known. I could have paid more attention. I'm going to do a full audit. If there's evidence of securities fraud, I'm reporting it to the SEC. Derek doesn't get to walk away from this." Tori put her arm around Claire. "You did it. You really did it." Claire's legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and the terrifying realization of what she had just done. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Tori said. "Now the real fight begins." The live stream had been viewed 2.3 million times by midnight. By morning, it was everywhere. Claire woke up in Tori's guest room to her phone exploding with notifications. Messages from reporters, legal threats from Derek's attorneys, and surprisingly, messages of support from women she had never met. "You're brave." One message read, "Thank you for speaking up. I'm in a similar situation." Another said, "You gave me hope." Grace arrived at 8 in the morning with coffee and a stack of newspapers. Every major outlet had covered the Gala confrontation. The headlines ranged from sympathetic to sensational. Billionaire CEO's wife exposes affair and fraud at charity gala. Derek Ashford, under investigation following shocking public accusations. Women come forward with pattern of abuse, claims against tech founder. "This is good and bad," Grace said, sitting down at Tori's kitchen table. "Good because public pressure will make it harder for Derek to bury this. Bad because his legal team is already spinning the narrative." She pulled up a press release on her tablet. Derek's lawyers had released a statement at 6 a.m. "Mr. Ashford is deeply saddened by the public breakdown of his marriage and his wife's struggles with mental health. He has attempted to get her help privately, but she has refused treatment. The accusations made last night are the product of a disturbed individual seeking attention and revenge. Mr. Ashford will be pursuing legal action for defamation and will vigorously defend himself against all false claims." Mental health, Claire said bitterly. Of course, that's the angle. It's textbook, Grace said. Discredit the victim by claiming she's unstable. But here's the thing, they made a mistake. By claiming you're mentally ill, they've opened the door for us to subpoena Derek's own communications. We can force him to provide evidence that you were unstable, which he can't do because you weren't. Tori came in from her bedroom, already on her phone. I've been contacted by 3 law firms offering to represent you pro bono. 2 of them specialize in high-profile civil rights cases. Why would they work for free? Because this case is about more than just your divorce. It's about how wealthy men use NDAs, prenups, and legal intimidation to silence women. If we win, it sets precedent. That makes it worth their time. If we win, Claire repeated. What if we don't? Then you'll spend years in litigation and probably end up with nothing, Tori said bluntly. Derek has nearly unlimited resources. He can drag this out forever if he wants to. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. Would you rather settle now and spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have stopped him, or fight and at least know you tried? Claire thought about Jennifer Porter, silent for 8 years. She thought about the other women who had come forward at last night. She thought about Rachel, who would eventually learn the hard way who Derek really was. I fight, Claire said. Good, Grace said. Because the SEC just announced they're opening a formal investigation into Derek's company. Claire's eyes widened. That fast? James Sullivan filed the complaint this morning with full documentation. Combined with the public outcry and the live stream evidence, they had no choice. If they didn't investigate, it would look like they were protecting a wealthy CEO. Tori grinned. And here's the really good news. Once the SEC is involved, Derek has much bigger problems than your divorce. If they find evidence of securities fraud, he's looking at federal charges. Can that help my case? It can void your prenup entirely. Contracts entered into as part of a fraudulent enterprise can be invalidated. If Derek married you to look stable for his IPO, and that IPO involved fraud, then your marriage contract is part of the fraud. For the first time since the gala, Claire felt hope. The doorbell rang. Tori checked the security camera and frowned. It's a courier, registered mail. She returned a moment later with a thick manila envelope. Claire's name was on the front, along with the law firm's return address. Inside were divorce papers, not from Derek, but from Claire's own newly appointed legal team. They had moved fast. We're filing first this time, Tori explained. On grounds of fraud, coercion, and abuse, we're requesting the prenup be voided, full disclosure of marital assets, and compensatory damages. How much? $5 million. Claire nearly choked on her coffee. That's insane. We'll never get that. Probably not. But we're starting high. It's negotiating strategy. Plus, it sends a message that we're not afraid of him. Over the next 3 weeks, the battle intensified. Derek's legal team filed countersuits, defamation, emotional distress. They requested Claire undergo psychiatric evaluation. They froze all joint accounts. But Claire's team fought back. They deposed James Sullivan, who testified under oath about the financial discrepancies. They submitted the text messages and financial records from Claire's USB drive. They brought in expert witnesses on financial abuse and coercive control. Most devastatingly, they convinced Jennifer Porter to provide sealed testimony describing Derek's pattern of behavior in his previous marriage. The media coverage was relentless. Claire could not go outside without cameras following her. Talk shows debated whether she was a brave survivor or a vindictive gold digger. Social media was split, but something unexpected happened. Women started reaching out to Grace's advocacy fund in unprecedented numbers. Women in similar situations, trapped by powerful partners, asking for help. You've created a movement, Grace told Claire one afternoon. Whether you meant to or not, Claire was not sure she wanted to be a symbol. She just wanted her life back. The turning point came 6 weeks after the gala. The SEC completed their preliminary investigation and announced formal charges against Derek Ashford and his company for securities fraud, wire fraud, and false statements to investors. Blake Ashford was also named in the charges for knowingly facilitating the fraud. Derek's company stock crashed. Investors filed lawsuits. The board of directors voted to remove Derek as CEO pending the outcome of the investigation. His empire was crumbling. And in the midst of all this chaos, Derek's lawyers approached Tori with a settlement offer. $10 million, Tori said, reading the offer letter. Full release from the prenup, mutual non-disparagement clause, all legal fees paid. What's the catch? Claire asked. You have to issue a public statement saying you may have been mistaken about some of your accusations. You have to apologize for the public nature of your confrontation. And you have to agree not to cooperate with any ongoing investigations into Derek or his company. They want me to recant. They want you to give Derek cover. If you apologize, his lawyers will use it to argue that you were emotional and exaggerated. It undermines the other women who came forward. It helps his criminal defense. Claire looked at the number. $10 million. It was more money than she had ever imagined having. It would solve every financial problem. It would let her start over. But it would also betray every woman who had trusted her by speaking up. No, Claire said. I won't do it. Tori smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. What do we counter with? We go to trial. We put Derek on in the stand. We make him answer for everything under oath. That could take years. It could, but Claire, you're not fighting for money anymore. You're fighting for accountability. That's worth more than any settlement. Grace nodded in agreement. The SEC case will take time, but it's solid. Derek is going to face consequences. The question is whether you want to be part of making sure those consequences are real. Claire thought about the past 2 months, the fear, the exhaustion, the constant attacks, but she also thought about the messages she got every day. Women thanking her, women telling their own stories, women finding courage because she had spoken first. We go to trial, Claire said. The trial of Hartwell versus Ashford began on a cold November morning, 9 months after the gala. The courthouse was mobbed with media and protesters. Signs reading "Believe survivors" and "Hold powerful men accountable" competed with counter-protesters holding signs that said "Innocent until proven guilty" and "Stop the witch hunt." Claire walked through the crowd with Tori on one side and Grace on the other. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. She kept her eyes forward and her spine straight. Inside the courtroom, Derek sat at the defense table with 3 lawyers. He looked older, thinner. The public scrutiny had taken a toll. Blake Ashford sat in the gallery, his face expressionless. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Claire's legal team presented the text messages, the financial records, the testimony from Jennifer Porter and the other women who had come forward. They brought in expert witnesses who explained financial abuse and coercive control. Derek's lawyers argued that Claire was a spurned wife seeking revenge. They presented their fabricated evidence of Claire's alleged affair. They called witnesses who testified that Claire had been withdrawn and antisocial during her marriage, implying mental instability. The cross-examinations were brutal. Derek's lawyer questioned Claire for 6 hours, trying to break her story, imply she was lying, suggest she had married Derek for money in the first place. Isn't it true, Mrs. Ashford, that you quit your job immediately after marrying my client? He asked me to quit. He said he wanted to support me. Or did you quit because you saw an opportunity to live off his wealth without having to work? I loved my job. I was good at it. I gave it up because I trusted him. You trusted a man you had only known for 8 months. I thought I knew him. I was wrong. How convenient that you only realized this after he became a billionaire. I realized it when I found texts of him planning to divorce me and calling me worthless. The lawyer had no response to that. When Derek took the stand, he was calm and practiced. He admitted to the affair, but framed it as the result of a loveless marriage. Claire and I grew apart, he said. She became depressed, isolated. I tried to help her, but she refused. My relationship with Rachel was wrong, I admit that, but it was a symptom of a broken marriage, not the cause. And the financial records, Claire's lawyer asked on cross-examination. The company funds used for personal expenses, accounting errors. My company grew quickly. There were some classification mistakes. Nothing criminal. So you accidentally spent company money on hotel rooms where you met your mistress. The charges were legitimate business expenses that happened to coincide with personal matters. It was a weak answer, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The turning point came when James Sullivan testified. He walked the jury through the financial records, showing not just coincidences but patterns, consistent, deliberate misclassification of personal expenses, money moved through shell accounts, charges deliberately timed to avoid quarterly audits. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping, James said. This was systematic fraud, and I was complicit because I didn't look closely enough. I trusted my partner. That was my mistake. Derek's lawyers tried to discredit James, suggesting he was bitter about being pushed out of the company, but James had receipts for every claim, and his testimony was devastating. The final witness was Jennifer Porter. She took the stand wearing a simple blue suit, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She looked directly at Derek as she spoke. "He isolated me from my family," she said. "He convinced me my friends were jealous of our relationship. He monitored my phone, my credit cards, my movements. When I finally found the courage to leave, he told me he would ruin me. He had lawyers, money, power. I had nothing. So I took his settlement and disappeared." "Why come forward now?" Claire's lawyer asked. "Because I realized I gave him permission to do it to someone else. My silence enabled him. I won't be silent anymore." Derek's lawyer tried to argue that Jennifer violated her NDA and her testimony should be excluded. But the judge ruled that NDAs cannot be used to cover up criminal activity or ongoing harm. The closing arguments were passionate on both sides. Derek's lawyer painted him as a flawed but successful man being destroyed by a vindictive ex-wife and a social media mob. Claire's lawyer painted her as a survivor who found her voice and stopped a predator. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Claire sat in a courthouse conference room with Tori and Grace, unable to eat or sleep, waiting for the verdict. "Whatever happens," Grace said, "you've already won in the ways that matter. You got your voice back. You helped other women. You held him accountable in the court of public opinion. I want him held accountable in real court too," Claire said. On the afternoon of the second day, the jury came back. They found in favor of Claire Hartwell on all counts. The prenup was voided. Claire was awarded $3.2 million in compensatory damages. The jury also recommended Derek Ashford be referred to law enforcement for further investigation into fraud and financial abuse. Claire felt her knees go weak. Tori caught her and pulled her into a fierce hug. Derek sat motionless at the defense table, his face blank. Blake Ashford stood and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the media frenzy was deafening, but Claire did not care. She had won. Not just money, not just validation. She had won her right to tell the truth. The criminal trial against Derek Ashford for securities fraud began 4 months after the civil verdict. By then, Derek had lost almost everything. His company had been sold to pay fines and settlements. His board position was gone. His reputation was destroyed. Most of his friends had abandoned him. Rachel Winters had left him 2 weeks after the gala and was now cooperating with the prosecutors. The criminal trial was even more damaging than the civil case. Federal prosecutors brought in forensic accountants who tore apart Derek's financial records. They proved he had knowingly misrepresented his company's finances to investors, used corporate funds for personal gain, and attempted to hide evidence when the investigation began. Blake Ashford was also on trial. The evidence showed he had not only known about Derek's fraud but had actively helped cover it up, pressuring witnesses and threatening legal action against anyone who questioned his son. Claire was called as a witness. She testified about Derek's control over her finances, his threats when she tried to leave, and the pattern of abuse that extended beyond their marriage. The defense tried to discredit her, but the civil trial verdict gave her testimony weight. A jury had already found her credible. A judge had already voided the prenup based on fraud. The criminal jury was out for only 6 hours. Guilty on all counts, Derek Ashford was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Blake Ashford received 3 years. Both were ordered to pay millions in restitution to defrauded investors. It was not enough. It never would be enough to undo the harm they had caused. But it was accountability. Claire attended the sentencing hearing. She wanted to look Derek in the eye one final time. He did not look at her. He stared straight ahead as the judge read his sentence, his face expressionless. But as he was led away in handcuffs, he turned his head just slightly, met her eyes, and she saw something there she had never seen before. Fear. He was going to prison. His empire was gone. His name was synonymous with fraud and abuse. And Claire Hartwell had survived him, 18 months after the gala. Claire stood in the office of her new company. It was not fancy. A modest space in a WeWork building downtown, shared with 3 other startups. But it was hers. The settlement and court award had given her financial security. But money was not what drove her anymore. She had started a consulting firm specializing in helping women understand and navigate prenuptial agreements. She also worked with Grace's advocacy fund, providing financial analysis and support to women escaping abusive relationships. Tori had joined her firm part-time, handling the legal side. Together, they had helped 47 women in the past year. "There's someone here to see you," Tori said, poking her head into Claire's office. A woman in her 20s stood in the waiting room, clutching a folder. She looked scared but determined. "My name is Amanda," she said. "I'm engaged to a man who insists on a prenup that gives me nothing if we divorce in the first 5 years. He says it's standard, but something feels wrong." Claire pulled out a chair. "Let me see the documents." She spent an hour walking Amanda through the prenup, explaining what was standard and what was coercive, what rights she was signing away, and what protections she should demand. "Don't sign anything until you've had an independent lawyer review it," Claire said. "And if he pressures you or says you're being unreasonable, that's a red flag. Marriage is a partnership. The contract should reflect that." Amanda left with more confidence than she had arrived with. This was Claire's work now. Not just helping women escape bad situations, but helping them avoid those situations in the first place. Prevention as much as rescue. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nathan Cross. "New article published. Wanted you to see it first." She clicked the link. Nathan's investigative piece was about the broader system that enabled men like Derek, the lawyers who drafted coercive prenups, the judges who enforced them, the social structures that made women financially dependent on partners. The Derek Ashford case was not unique. Nathan wrote, "It was just unusually public. For every woman brave enough to speak up, there are hundreds more trapped by the same systems. Until we change those systems, the Derek Ashfords of the world will keep finding new victims." Claire shared the article on her social media. It immediately started getting traction. That evening, she met Grace and Tori for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the village. They had made this a monthly tradition, a reminder of the team that had fought together. "I got a call from a senator's office today," Grace said. "They're drafting legislation to limit the enforceability of NDAs in cases involving abuse or harassment. They want me to testify. Will you, of course, this is what the fight was always about. Not just individual cases, but systemic change." Tori raised her wine glass. "To systemic change, and to surviving the bastards who make it necessary." They clinked glasses. Claire looked around the table at these two women who had risked so much for her, who had stood beside her when she had nothing to offer in return except her truth. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," Grace said, "but I'm glad you didn't have to." Later that night, Claire returned to her apartment. Not the penthouse with Derek, not Tori's guest room, her own place. A one-bedroom in Brooklyn with exposed brick and natural light and furniture she had chosen herself. She poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. Another message from a woman asking for help. Claire smiled and started typing a response. The work was never done. There would always be another Derek, another system to fight, another woman who needed support. But for the first time in years, Claire felt like herself. Strong, capable, free. She had walked through fire and come out the other side. And now she was helping other women do the same. 2 years after the gala, Claire stood on a stage at a women's conference in Chicago. 500 people filled the ballroom, most of them young professionals, survivors, advocates. She had been invited to speak about her experience, about surviving financial abuse and finding the courage to fight back. Claire was nervous. She always was before speaking engagements. But she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to speak anyway. "My name is Claire Hartwell," she began, her voice steady. 2 years ago, I stood in a ballroom in New York City and told the truth about my marriage. I expected to be destroyed. Instead, I was freed." She told her story, not the sensational version the media had reported, but the human one. The slow erosion of self that happened in an abusive relationship, the isolation, the financial control, the moment she decided enough was enough. "People ask me if I won," Claire said. "I got money from the settlement. I got validation from the jury. I got to see my ex-husband go to prison, but none of that is what I won." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. "I won my voice back. I won my right to tell my own story. I won myself." The audience was silent, listening. A lot of women have reached out to me over the past 2 years. They tell me stories that sound like mine. Partners who control money, prenups that trap them, threats and intimidation that keep them silent, and they ask me what they should do. Claire leaned forward slightly. "Here's what I tell them. Document everything. Build your own financial safety net, even if it's small. Find people you trust, lawyers, advocates, friends who will support you. Understand your rights under the law. And most importantly, believe that you deserve better than being controlled and diminished." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation. It showed the growth of Grace's advocacy fund since the trial, the number of women they had helped, the policy changes they had influenced, the NDAs they had successfully challenged. "One voice speaking up can start a movement," Claire said. "My voice was just the first, but it's the collective voice of every survivor who came forward after me that created real change. We are stronger together." After her speech, women lined up to talk to her, to share their stories, to ask for advice, to thank her for speaking up. One woman, maybe 30 years old, waited until everyone else had left. "I'm in the middle of a divorce," she said quietly. "My husband has threatened to bankrupt me if I don't accept his settlement. He has expensive lawyers. I have nothing." Claire pulled out a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. Tell them I sent you. We'll get you the legal help you need. And if your husband wants a fight, we'll give him one." The woman started to cry. "I thought I was alone." "You're not. You never were." The woman left, clutching the business card like a lifeline. Tori appeared from the back of the ballroom. "Great speech. Grace is on the phone. She wants to know if you're free next month for a congressional hearing." "About what?" "Prenuptial agreement reform. They want survivor testimony." Claire thought about standing in front of Congress, telling her story to lawmakers who could actually change the system. Tell her yes. As they walked out of the conference hall, Claire's phone buzzed with a news alert. Derek Ashford released from federal prison after serving 2 years. Will be on supervised release for 3 years. Claire stopped walking. Derek was out. She felt a momentary flutter of the old fear. Then it passed. He could not hurt her anymore. He had no power, no money, no reputation. He was a convicted felon on parole. And she was the woman who had brought him down. "You okay?" Tori asked. "Yeah," Claire said. "I'm fine." And she was. The story of Claire Hartwell and Derek Ashford became part of the larger conversation about power, abuse, and accountability. The Gala livestream was studied in law schools. The trial transcripts were cited in articles about financial abuse. Claire's testimony influenced legislation in 3 states. But for Claire Oscano, the most important moment was not the verdict or the sentence or the policy changes. It was the moment at the gala when she decided to speak. That decision had changed everything. 3 years after that night, Claire was offered a position at a major financial firm as a senior analyst. They wanted her expertise and her perspective. They valued what she had survived. She turned them down. She was building something more important than a corporate career. She was building a network of survivors who were becoming advocates. Women who had been silenced finding their voices. Systems of support that would outlast any individual story. Grace retired from active work but stayed on as an advisor. Tori's practice grew. Nathan continued investigating powerful men who abused their positions. And Claire kept telling her story. Because every time she spoke, another woman found courage. Every time she testified, another law changed. Every time she helped someone understand their rights, she prevented another Derek Ashford from finding a victim. The work was never done. But that was okay. Claire Hartwell had found her purpose in the wreckage of her worst experience. She had transformed pain into power, and she was using that power to make sure no woman had to face what she faced alone. The billionaire had mocked his plain wife, expecting her to disappear quietly. Instead, she had become the voice that could not be silenced. And that voice was still speaking.